When the tax shelter era was over and we had gatekeepers and we started having places like Telefilm, they then had a responsibility to say, okay, well, we should not be making this exploitative film. We should be making art. Because I started in the early 90s, so I had just missed that tax shelter era. And so that easy money, which in some ways you could look back on and say, well, that was not a good way to spend money. In other ways, you can say it was a fantastic way to spend money. One thing's for sure, the two beneficiaries of the tax shelter era were world cinema, in my opinion, and lawyers. Lionsgate Films has had a very important impact on world cinema to a certain degree, given that they really are a studio now. But having grown out of Canada and being a result of the Canadian system and the Canadian industry, they've had a huge impact on Canadian film, and in particular on my career. The second movie I ever made was a very small genre movie called Ginger Snaps. When I first started working with John Fawcett on Ginger Snaps, I knew, because we'd made a short film together, and then we realized that, oh, we really liked working with each other, and we seemed to bring out the best in one another. And the same thing happened with Brett. Brett had been an editor on a previous film I'd made called Blood and Donuts, and he was just such a unique thinker.
The first film, we equated the lycanthropy with menstruation, and it was about a woman coming of age and your body going through changes, and those changes, whether it's from a girl into a woman, but in the first Ginger Snaps, it was from a girl into a female werewolf.
They were really female stories.
And I think that was one of the triggers of the Ginger Snaps. It was these two girls against the world. They lived or died by their own merits, no one else.
We set out to try to do something that would be unique and would be different, and the way to do that was to not have male leads. Back when we made the first Ginger Snaps, like 95% of all movies were male leads. It's one way that we could stand out was by having female leads.
I guess it's easy to say that Ginger Snaps, because it's revolves around those issues of female bonding and of literal sisterhood, is informed by Canadian past in terms of Catholicism and a lot of women going into religious service. At the same time, I think you shouldn't overstate that element of sisterhood in Ginger Snaps. So you see the same kind of female bonding in films like The Craft, for example, that intense female friendship.
The success of that film has mostly to do with the fact that teenage girls at the time identified with it, probably in a way that Canadian teenage girls have never identified with a Canadian movie before.
And in the second film, we were trying to equate the lycanthropy with a blood disease.
We made the first film. They were only our foreign sales company. They weren't a distributor in the US. And then when we wanted to make a sequel, they said, yeah, they would come in and they would be the distributor in the US, at which point I said, well, then we're making two of them. And they agreed. They were wholeheartedly supportive of Canadian-made genre films.
Actually, it's kind of just occurring to me now. It's in Orphan Black, it's another strong female who discovers she doesn't control her own body. And that's what a lot of horror films do. They take something that you think is a safe environment or that you think is something that's normal, and it's thrusting this uncontrollable urges at you. It's making you not being able to control your own body.
I think Orphan Black has been really successful because it plays on those issues of personal and national identity that have been really at the forefront of Canadian history. So this sense of a specific group being under attack for something and trying to preserve their way of life, it kind of resonates with issues in the past about language and about sovereignty for Quebec, for example.
I don't know if we'd see ourselves as uniquely Canadian, but we're certainly proud to be Canadian, and we don't shy away from the fact that we're Canadian.
I think we owe most of it, at least from a cinema history point of view, to David Cronenberg with all of his body horror.